Does that help Tesla? I mean, you had Tim Waltz, who's a huge jerk, right? You know.
Something happened in the last 48 hours that shook the entire US economy. More than $6.4 trillion disappeared from the markets, making it the largest collapse in history in such a short period of time. The loss of such colossal capital affected millions of Americans whose retirement savings and 401,000 plans collapsed before their eyes. But what is Donald Trump doing? He continues to claim that everything is under control. How can the actions of one man cause such a global economic crisis? And does Trump really realize that his tariff policies caused this catastrophic decline?
Running around on stage with a Tesla stock price, where the stock price had gone in half. And he was overjoyed. What an evil thing to do. What a creep, what a jerk. Like who derives joy?
A host of large companies like Apple, Tesla, and Qualcomm have felt the impact of the new tariffs, while small businesses and ordinary families have begun to feel the effects on their most basic needs. Groceries, cars, basic necessities, everything is getting more expensive. Every day the tension among the population grows. People are wondering, will we even be able to retire? How secure is our future? An economy that was considered the strongest in the world now looks like a fragile house of cards. So what is Trump doing at the center of this chaos? He's lounging on the golf course, and amid his words and posts on social media, Americans are losing the last vestiges of stability. What is the president counting on when? Instead of taking concrete steps that might do something to alleviate people's suffering, he is still justifying his decisions.
After Trump imposed those sweeping 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel imports, the European Union retaliating with tariffs on up to $28 billion of U.S. goods. Trump making it clear this isn't over, vowing to respond in kind with sweeping retaliatory tariffs early next month.
They're doing what they should be doing, perhaps, for the European Union, but it does create ill will. And as you know, we're going to be doing reciprocal tariffs. So whatever they charge us, we're charging them.
Canada also striking back with new tariffs on $20 billion worth of U.S. goods, mostly steel and aluminum, but also computers and sporting goods.
Meanwhile, criticism of his policies is mounting. Even his longtime friend, investor Warren Buffett, has publicly rejected Trump's statements, arguing that such measures will not help the economy, but will only hurt workers and honest businesses. Protests have been heard everywhere, with people taking to the streets and social media buzzing with outrage. The hashtags "Trump is destroying America" and "Resist Trump" are becoming symbols of an era when Americans can no longer remain silent about what is happening.
So there are a couple of things that might be going on here. So on the one hand, it could be that just at a very basic level, Musk has quickly observed a 40% decline in sales in Tesla in Europe.
But what is most disturbing is not only happening inside the US. On the international stage, America is already facing retaliation. And in particular, Canada, once a close ally of the US, is now ready to move into economic warfare. Canadian leaders are making it clear that they will no longer depend on America to forge alliances with Europe and Asia, and the US economy itself could face catastrophic consequences. What's next? Will Trump be in a position to change course and correct his mistakes? Or will his decisions lead to an even greater global economic disaster? We'll tell you what's going on behind the scenes of this trade war and how his actions could change the world.
Outperforming as well in some cases, doing better than Tesla. And you just have to think, how much more is this a sustained issue for Tesla going forward, given the fact that you have Elon Musk, who's been very forthright in his opinions, particularly weighing in on politics, particularly in Europe. We've just had the European elections, which Musk has been very focused on. But across the piece, when you look at the performance for Tesla in Europe, it's not just in small countries. There are a lot of countries where Tesla has been performing badly, including in Germany, in the UK, where it has been lagging, and Spain as well.
The economic crisis that has just rocked the US has left everyone in shock. Over $6.4 trillion disappeared from the markets in just 48 hours, the largest loss in the stock markets in such a short period of time. How many more people have to live through this drop to realize that things are spiraling out of control? From big investors to ordinary Americans who have lost their life savings, everyone is going through shock. But despite the obvious economic calamity, Donald Trump continues to insist that the economy is just fine. Amid the collapse of stock indexes like the Dow Jones and the S&P 500, Trump seems confident that everything that is happening is just part of his strategic game. He claims that the market decline is a temporary but necessary process to make the US even stronger. However, such statements only add to the discontent of Americans.
And police in Italy are investigating possible arson after a fire destroyed more than a dozen Tesla vehicles. Elon Musk is calling the incident at a Rome dealership terrorism. This comes as Tesla has been the target of recent protests around the world.
Trump's insistence that everything will be fine, while millions of people lose their life savings, create a sense of complete disconnect with reality. Every day that his trade tariff policies result in new losses, he continues to justify his actions. The problem is that it's not just big companies like Apple or Tesla facing the consequences of his economic policies, but every American, from retirees to salaried workers. Millions of families now don't know if they can still afford basic necessities. And the cost of this crisis goes beyond just the money lost in the stock markets. The impact this situation will have on the economy could affect all areas of life, from social services to employment.
Teslas are being torched across the country. Dealerships shot up and set on fire. Spray paint to vandalize and make a statement. People in Southern California are getting notes on their Teslas, calling them complicit Nazis for owning electric cars.
No clear strategy, no clear plan for economic recovery is coming from Trump. Instead, he continues to claim that his tariffs are the key to America's recovery, despite the criticism and chaos caused by these policies. Trump has even gone as far as deciding to impose new tariffs targeting China and other countries to stimulate American industry. But this move, according to economists, has only caused the situation to worsen further. Instead of offsetting the losses, the tariffs have increased the prices of goods and services. The consumer power of the population has decreased, and every day more and more families cannot afford to buy basic items.
Well, this feels more like a Tesla-only story when you look at just this fall in EV sales for them, that they're suffering across Europe, down 45% in January. The wider EV market in Europe up 37%, so rivals are catching up and performing.
Equally disturbing is the fact that as the economy fails, the president himself seems completely disconnected from reality. At a time when his own policies are causing an economic storm, he continues to flip out and find excuses for his actions. Even amidst the huge losses, he continues his usual regimen of vacations on the golf course, public statements that raise even more doubts about his leadership skills. Many analysts and economists have begun to say that Trump is leading the country into an economic crisis the US has not experienced since the Great Depression. His inaction, or perhaps underestimation of the magnitude of what is happening, is becoming a cause of growing discontent. Ordinary citizens are increasingly asking, how is it possible that the president continues to defend his decisions when the welfare of millions is at stake?
Over the last couple of months. But the other thing that this could potentially be is an attempt at readjustment or correction by the Trump administration, in that one of Trump's closest kind of allies and supporters, and someone who's clearly very influential in the administration, is coming out to kind of push back against the recently implemented policies. So I'm thinking, or maybe hopeful is the right word, that this might be a signal that the administration is considering walking back some of those policies.
The state of the economy continues to deteriorate. For the first time in decades, the labor market has begun to show signs of a serious slowdown. Large companies, previously seen as pillars of the American economy, have begun laying off thousands of workers in an attempt to cut costs. Downtime at large corporations like Apple and General Motors has become the norm, illustrating just how hard tariffs have hit the real economy. Against this backdrop, a host of FMCG companies have also announced that they will not be able to continue operating under the same conditions. This has caused additional tension in society, where families are facing shortages of goods and rising prices. In this environment, many are wondering how much longer Americans will be able to endure such economic turmoil. For many, everything that is happening has become unbearable. Inflation continues to rise, and the prices of housing, food, and transportation are hitting family budgets hard. While the biggest banks and corporations are starting to cut jobs, ordinary people are losing everything they had. Some analysts are already starting to say that all of this could lead to the worst economic crisis since the beginning of the 20th century if Trump doesn't change his mind.
Tesla shares have slumped by more than 9% amid a fall in sales in Europe. The electric vehicle maker posted lower sales across 5 European countries, including France and the UK. Joining us now to discuss this is CBS News foreign correspondent Remy Inocencio. Remy, why do we believe these sales are dropping? What's driving that?
Sure. Well, Errol, basically what Elon Musk has been talking about over the past, say, few months, ever since Donald Trump's election back to the White House, that has been fueling this anger, this frustration. Some even say disgust towards Musk, and they're taking it out on Tesla. Tesla now feeling the pain. But because of what's happening here in Europe, Tesla sales fell by nearly half across the continent just last month, 45%.
Instead of acting quickly and decisively, he continues to push his strategy, trying to convince the country that there will actually be long-term benefits from his actions. This seems like an attempt to divert attention away from the real problems. Numerous experts, including former Trump supporters, are now publicly stating that his approach to tariffs and the economy as a whole is deeply flawed. They warn that such measures will do no good in the long run and will only increase unemployment and inflation. The situation is escalating. People's anger is growing and protests are beginning to cover more and more cities. No excuses are no longer satisfying. People are demanding real steps, not empty promises. However, as long as Trump remains committed to his strategy, the crisis continues to unfold. And the question on everyone's mind is growing louder. How long will the country endure when the lives and well-being of millions are at stake?
We begin with the president's trade war escalating tonight. This evening, the retaliation against the United States, Canada, and the European Union responding quickly, just hours after President Trump's 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States.
The tariffs imposed by Trump will probably be remembered as the beginning of not only economic collapse, but also political instability. The answer to the question that worries everyone never came. Who will be responsible for this crisis? And will the US be able to recover from the blow that the trade war has dealt to foreign markets? One thing is certain, America's future is in question. As the economy continued to plummet, protests in major cities grew larger and larger. But despite the growing chaos, Donald Trump himself continued to defend his tariff measures without recognizing the obvious consequences. People who had lost their savings took to the streets, and their discontent grew louder and louder. Organized demonstrations began in Washington, D.C., New York, and other major American cities with slogans like "Trump is destroying America" and hashtags like "Resist Trump" and "Stop the Tariffs" proliferated on social media. It was no longer just discontent, it was true popular anger that spanned all walks of life.
Canada, the largest supplier of steel to the U.S., slapping new tariffs on $20 billion worth of U.S. goods that are sold in Canada. And the 27 countries of the European Union imposing retaliatory tariffs on up to $28 billion worth of U.S. goods sold in Europe, including Harley-Davidson motorcycles and Kentucky bourbon. President Trump with the Irish Prime Minister visiting the White House today. The president suggesting his tariffs won't stop here, saying, "Of course, I'm going to respond." And tonight, right here, the new poll showing 56% of Americans disapprove of President Trump's handling of the economy. The number's even worse now on the president's tariffs.
Millions of people who had lost their jobs and savings began to ask, how could Trump have allowed his decisions to lead to such an economic collapse? These questions became even more pressing after influential figures like Warren Buffett publicly denounced Trump's past policies. Buffett, who once supported the president, has now stated that the imposed tariffs will have extremely negative consequences for the American economy in the long run. He emphasized that such measures only exacerbate the problems with rising prices and nullify any attempts at recovery. In response, Trump tried to justify himself by claiming that the economic difficulties are only temporary measures to make America stronger, but his words sounded increasingly unconvincing. The protests weren't just limited to the streets, they spread to social media as well. Thousands of Americans became active in discussing their problems with rising prices, job loss and falling savings. The expected results from Trump's policies were not being realized, and instead of positive changes, there was a feeling that the situation was only getting worse. Even Republicans have begun to criticize the president, saying that his plan is not just not working, but is instead destroying the economy. Senator Ted Cruz, who was previously a Trump supporter, openly stated that the imposed tariffs jeopardize the future of American industry and could lead to mass bankruptcies. His criticism signaled to many that Republicans were beginning to lose faith in their president's policies.
I mean, the things that he's doing is not trying to make America better. He's ruining our infrastructure, every department in our government. He's ruining, and he's right now destroying our economy. He's taken away all of our allies. We're a pariah in the world.
A key point was that Trump's political support began to wane, even among those who had previously been his ardent supporters. One of the most glaring examples was a recent statement by Trump's former running mate, Senator Lindsey Graham. In his interview, he admitted that the economic situation caused by the president's policies is out of control. He emphasized that America is facing serious problems, and if Trump does not change course, the country could face a real economic collapse. His words were a revelation for many Republicans who were beginning to doubt the president's actions. But instead of taking concrete steps to improve the situation, Trump remained silent and, even more, continued to express his confidence in the correctness of the chosen course. He claimed that his plans were long-term measures that would bring economic benefits in the future. However, his statements increasingly seemed detached from reality. At a time when the economic situation required urgent solutions, Trump continued to blame the problems on his political opponents and the system that allegedly prevented him from implementing necessary reforms.
But they are not ruling out the possibility that this was arson. At the same time, as you just mentioned, there are groups that have been organizing ongoing and peaceful protests at Tesla dealerships around the world. These demonstrations targeting Elon Musk and his affiliation with the Trump administration. Italy's prime minister is said to be close friends with Musk, and there were reports that Teslas have been vandalized in her hometown in Italy. Diane.
By the time the administration began publicly defending its policies, the crisis continued to grow. The situation escalated after the media reported a sharp drop in Trump's approval rating due to his economic policies. According to the latest polls, more than 56% of Americans expressed dissatisfaction with the president's actions, while only 43% supported his decisions. These numbers have signaled that even those who supported Trump in the election have begun to disown him. In the face of growing discontent, the White House was forced to organize a press conference that was supposed to demonstrate that the administration was still in control. However, as is often the case, instead of calming down, the situation only worsened. The issue of Trump's third term, which did not stop being discussed on social networks, led to a new scandal. At a press conference, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was forced to answer questions regarding Trump's possible third term. Her answer seemingly meant to dispel rumors, but on the contrary, only added fuel to the fire. Instead of categorically denying the possibility of a third term, Leviticus gave a very vague answer that only created more rumors and doubts about the legitimacy of Trump's power.
That's from the European Automobile Manufacturers Association. People just choosing with their wallets to not buy Teslas because of that Musk-Trump association. And actually here in London, an activist group called Everyone Hates Elon actually have been hacking bus stop signs with posters. I actually passed one yesterday. First, I wasn't quite sure what was happening, but it said the words 0 to 1939 in 3 seconds. Illusion here, 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds or something. But this poster was alluding to the start of World War II, and the image was of Musk giving that hand salute that we saw at Trump's inauguration that many have attacked as a Nazi gesture. Musk, though, has neither admitted or denied what he was doing. But we're seeing the knock-on effect of that anti-Musk anger across Europe and in terms of sales.
At this point, it became clear that the problems facing the American economy were not solved by simple statements or empty promises. The country demanded action, but instead all Trump could offer was a continuation of policies that were leading to a deeper economic crisis. Republicans began to look at this situation uneasily, and even those who were once Trump's most vocal supporters began to wonder how much longer their party could sustain his policies. But as with the stock market crisis, Trump's tariff policies have created enormous chaos that, as it turns out, could have long-term consequences not only for the economy, but also for the political stability of the United States. In response to growing discontent, Trump became increasingly aggressive in his public remarks, increasingly blaming his opponents and the world's economies for U.S. problems. His actions began to exacerbate internal conflicts in the country, and protests and public discontent continued to gain momentum.
KTLA Samantha Cortese joins us live with more on the wave of vandalism in protest of Elon Musk and his role in Washington. Sam?
Hi, Sharon, Micah. The ATF and FBI are collaborating with federal, state, and local law enforcement to investigate acts of domestic terrorism surrounding Teslas.
Confrontation within the political elites continued to intensify, and the question became increasingly clear to Trump. Would he be able to hold on to his power in the face of the growing political and economic crisis, or would he be the sole perpetrator of this catastrophic decline? When Trump continued to persist with his tariff policies, the consequences were not long in coming. Things became increasingly tense on the international stage, especially as his decisions began to drive America into a global economic crisis. Canada, one of the most important trading partners of the US, announced that it was ready to respond to the new tariffs imposed by Trump. This was not just a warning, but an explicit decision to sever economic ties with the US. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney said that if the US continues to implement aggressive trade policies, Canada will be forced to increase its economic alliances with Europe and Asia. Carney made it clear that Canada is not going to continue to depend on trade relations with one country and is ready to look for alternative ways to develop its economy.
Hey Diane, this investigation really just beginning, and one of the key elements will of course be the surveillance video, and investigators potentially have a lot of it to work with as they try to figure out what caused this fire. We know that surveillance footage has been turned over, including video from each of the cars, which could prove vital to understanding what happened here, because each vehicle has its own camera system that works even when the car is off, and 16 cars burned in this fire. And right now, investigators don't know what caused it.
Canadian authorities have already started negotiations with France, the UK, and other European countries, proposing new trade agreements that could be beneficial to both sides. On top of that, Canada has begun to aggressively develop its renewable energy sector, which experts believe will allow the country to become a leader in the global fight against climate change. This was a message to the US that in the face of a tariff war, Canada is ready to become an economic superpower, regardless of what happens in Washington. Taking measures such as retaliatory tariffs on electricity and goods made in the US led to increased market tensions.
We've accomplished more in 43 days than most administrations accomplished in 4 years or 8 years, and we are just getting started.
He praised all the domestic actions he has taken so far on immigration.
And I deployed the U.S. military and Border Patrol to repel the invasion of our country.
And spending cuts.
We are draining the swamp. It's very simple.
Against the backdrop of all these crisis processes, there were new questions that Americans and people in other countries were asking themselves. How long can the US continue in the same vein with its aggressive trade policy? Is it still possible to return the situation to the previous course? And what would happen if Trump continued to escalate trade wars and act alone, without listening to the advice of his allies? The situation seemed to be spiraling out of control, and while Trump continued to believe in his strategy, critics of his policies only grew more vocal. A tumultuous international backlash, growing discontent at home, and a slumping economy were clear signs that the consequences of his tariff policies could be catastrophic. At this point, however, many began to ask a more serious question. Would this isolation of the US lead to a complete collapse of the world economy, where America, instead of taking the lead, would find itself on the margins of the world's processes, wondering how to get out of this chaos?